In the arts and entertainment sphere, a well-written and directed cast of characters is of great importance. But not all characters are created equally. No, most of the time in movies and shows and other works, there is a central main protagonist and a central main antagonist. It's the most common form of writing in these types of stories, and it helps the writer shift their full focus onto writing the main characters and only having to write minimally for the so-called side characters, or supporting cast. But in some forms of media, namely big-time productions, especially those seen on Broadway shows or other major Hollywood productions, there exists something known as an ensemble cast. But what makes the perfect ensemble cast? Well, dear viewers, that is exactly what we are going to be exploring today as we take a look at one of my personal favorite video games, and in my opinion, the perfect example of a well-written and fleshed out ensemble cast, a little game called Final Fantasy XIII. But as usual, before we get started, I'd like to remind you please to click on that subscribe button and the little dingy bell next to it so you don't miss out on any more content from Wu-Tai Clan Gaming. Don't feel like it? Well, perhaps after this video you will. Without any further ado, let's jump right in. An ensemble cast is defined as a cast of unique characters who are all given equal screen time and all drive the main narrative of the story equally. All are given equal screen time and are all viewed as integral to advancing the main plotline. In the Final Fantasy series, there is always a wide array of main playable characters, but in my opinion, despite all the Final Fantasy characters being awesome, many of these games have only one or two major characters that are actually considered 100% necessary to the story, with the main focus primarily being on the protagonist and the others being relegated to the supporting cast role. When Final Fantasy XIII released in Japan, December 17, 2009, and worldwide on March 9, 2010, it released to very mixed reviews, or so you would hear from the haters. The game actually scored very high and was praised for its use of the PS3 and Xbox 360's graphical capabilities, as well as the game's setting, story, and characters. It's obvious that I loved it too, and this isn't a review of the game or anything, so I'll save most of the gushing over all things about the game apart from the characters for another time. Well, mostly. As I said before, this game was the first in the series to be released on the PlayStation 3 and the Xbox 360, and the graphics in this game, when compared with those of the previous entry for the PS2, Final Fantasy XII, was like night and day. This game looked like it could have been a movie, which is kind of perfect for the theme of this video. Yes, while voice acting was a thing for both Final Fantasy X and Final Fantasy XII, this game for me was the one that took storytelling and narrative-driven dramatic gaming to the next level. I was still a broke high school student when this game came out, and I still only had my PlayStation 2, but I had a friend who was just as obsessed with the Final Fantasy series as I was, and I remember first hearing from him and one of his friends having a conversation about the game early on, where this other friend of ours was saying how he thought the game was bad because it was quote-unquote all corridors. I'm glad I didn't care what anyone else thought about things back then, and also I feel the same way now when it comes to media. I always prefer to try things out for myself, and I don't really put much stock into reviews. And boy, am I glad I did, because I was in for an incredible ride. Final Fantasy has always had unforgettable characters with great dynamics towards each other, but Final Fantasy XIII fleshed out its main cast in a way that even I didn't anticipate. After finishing the game and rolling the credits for the very first time, also getting my first ever Platinum Trophy in the series, a feat that I am super proud of to this day due to those challenging Seathstone quests, of course. Upon rolling those credits, I really sat back and thought to myself, wow, I really love these characters. Like, this felt like a movie, a Broadway production, if you will. This cast of characters were just so perfectly written, and each of them could have been viewed as the protagonist of the game for various reasons. But most importantly of all, as they say in the old Bundy show, you can't have one without the other. The first two characters that we are introduced to at the beginning of this game in the opening cinematic are Lightning and Saz Kazatroy. They derail a train that is transporting exiles from Cocoon, We don't know what connects these two characters immediately, but they're both in the fight together early on for similar reasons. Saz wants to save his son Dosh, and Lightning is trying to save her sister Sarah. Both Sarah and Dosh had come in contact with a pulse fal'Cie, an entity that when encountered tasked them with fulfilling a focus, and when that focus is fulfilled, would see them turned into crystal for eternity. Armed with the knowledge that their family members were taken by this fal'Cie, they are out to rescue them. The tragedy of these two characters immediately connects them, even if it is not apparent at the start. Lightning's sister Sarah mistakenly encountered the fal'Cie while attempting to save Lightning during the purge in their town of Bodom. The purge is happening, of course, because the government is basically trying to cover all their bases, because they fear everyone in the vicinity could be a l'Cie now, thanks to the Pulse fal'Cie being there. Meanwhile, we meet Snow Villiers and his group of resistance fighters. Snow is actually the fiancé of Lightning's sister Sarah, and Lightning has never been a fan of Snow, and refused to accept him marrying her sister. This is something that she doubles down on while Sarah is crystallized, citing that Snow failed to protect her. Snow possibly has the most unenviable role in this group of heroes, as he is also hated by a young boy named Hope Estine. We are introduced first to Hope when he and the other exiles are asked by Snow and his gang who among them wants to take up arms against the Psycom forces. The final gun is accepted by Hope's mother, Nora. Snow unfortunately is unable to save Nora, who was lost in an explosion. Snow tries to pull her to safety, but she was already gone, and as her grip subsides, her body falls to the depths below. From Hope's perspective, Snow was as good as a murderer himself. Hope later vows revenge on Snow. The other character that we're introduced to at this time is Erba Dia Vanille, who also accepts the gun, though we don't get to see her really use it, and she immediately also offers comfort to Hope after his mother's death. Vanille is totally like a big sister to Hope during this time, and I enjoyed their chemistry from the start. Vanille is also the narrator of the game's events, which is contrast early on to Lightning because the so-called main protagonist in this game, whereas in all reality, any of the characters can be viewed as such, as we are all exploring today. We have already established a few connections between these characters, and already this early in the game have taken control of more than one different character as our party leader, a role usually only reserved for one character. It's something we hadn't seen much of since Final Fantasy VI. While in 7, we had a brief break from Cloud due to plot reasons and controlled Laguna and his gang in flashbacks in Final Fantasy VIII, this was still unconventional at the time for the series. At this point in the story, Lightning, Saz, Snow, Hope, and Vanille are all headed for the Pulse fal'Cie on a collision course with Destiny itself. We mentioned that Vanille seems to take on a big sister role to Hope, encouraging him and reassuring him throughout the early game. If Vanille is like a sister to Hope, then Lightning is pretty much like a mother to him. There's actually a parental-like scene in Chapter 3 of the game, after Hope oversteps his boundaries with Snow, blaming him and Sarah for the group being turned into l'Cie, where Snow scolds Hope and it causes him to cower away, right into Lightning, who was sporting the most pissed-off mother look ever. Hope had a great sisterly figure in Vanille and a great parental/mentor relationship with Light. Hope also learned to deal with his grief and anger thanks to Snow, and coming to the realization that he was not to blame for what happened to his mother, helping Hope find his resolve and move forward, and also, in a way, taking on a big brother role. Hope later admits that Snow saved him, and told his father he wouldn't have made it home without him. Back to Lightning and Hope's relationship early on. Lightning acts like she has no interest in dealing with Hope, who trips and falls a few times when traveling with Lightning. Lightning is the type of stoic character who hides her emotions, something that is undoubtedly a trait of her being in the military. The reality is, though, that Lightning has a great heart, and Hope eventually resolves to prove himself to her in the Gopra Whitewood. I called this scene the one where Hope's balls dropped. You can see that Lightning is proud of him, and even tells him that he's learning now. Such a proud mother she is. Lightning and Snow have a very tumultuous relationship early on, as we'd mentioned earlier. Lightning not only wasn't the biggest fan of his personality and of him dating her sister, but also had further resentment towards him for what happened to Sarah, becoming a l'Cie and being captured by the Pulse fal'Cie. What we said about Lightning earlier, though, rings true here. She isn't just a mean, emotionless, stoic woman. She later comes to realize the true content of Snow's character, and she learns a lot about herself thanks to the turnaround on Snow. Snow really helped Lightning become more tolerant and understanding of a person, much like Snow helped Hope in much the same way. Lightning's favorite phrase about Snow is, "He's too stubborn to die." And of course, she's grateful for this. Lightning admits that she was mad at herself for what happened to Sarah and just couldn't show it. She knew it wasn't Snow's fault what happened to her, and Snow was the only person who believed in Sarah from the very start. Snow and Hope's dynamic at the beginning, where Hope wants to take revenge on Snow, is very much reminiscent of the story between the characters of Ken and Shinjiro in Persona 3. One can't help but think that this was in some way ripped directly from Persona 3. Nothing wrong with borrowing a good piece of writing for another good piece of writing. Maybe that's not worded correctly. Plagiarism is bad, kids. But this is different, I guess. Hope realizes that revenge isn't the only way to go, and that Snow isn't some evil man who killed his mother on purpose. Well, I could have told you that, little man. Man, Snow really is the guy, huh? Helping change two different characters' thought processes and helping them both reach a new level of maturity in their own ways. You go, Snow. The relationship we see between Vanille and Saz, wow, this includes one of the most powerful scenes in the series in my opinion. Vanille feels so much guilt for the fact that herself and her girlfriend Fang, yes, they're together, get over it, were present when Saz's son Dodge was branded by the Falsi Kujata. It was not directly their fault, as it only happened because Kujata felt threatened by the Paris presence. Vanille and Fang were also indirectly responsible, though, for Sarah wandering into the Falsi cocoon, as they had mistakenly left the door to the vestige open, and Sarah wandered in. I don't think you can blame them for Sarah's curiosity, though, personally. I'm gonna continue to defend both Vanille and Fang here. They didn't do anything wrong. It just didn't look good for them. The confession scene, though. The big reveal from a guilt-ridden Vanille possibly goes a little over the top, but it's such a great scene and very emotional. But before we get to that scene, let's just talk about the relationship between Vanille and Saz early on. The relationship they start to develop feels like an uncle and his energetic little niece, and this all leads to possibly some of the most emotional content in the game, as I just said, and the segment in Nautilus. What a roller coaster of emotions this is. Despite the good time our characters seem to be having with the Eidolon Parade and other fun events going on, such as engaging in finding little baby chocobo chicks, while a catchy rendition of the chocobo theme plays called Chocobos of Cocoon, complete with happy-go-lucky lyrics that sound like they could be sung by Selphie from Final Fantasy VIII. This entire time, it's sprinkled with feelings of dread. Something's just looming in the background. You just know things are going to go bad. Feelings of unease are just everywhere. We know what Vanille knows, and it hurts. We know everything comes out in the wash, as they say. When Dodge shows up and is promptly turned into crystal, just mere seconds after reuniting with his father, that sinking feeling gets more intense. Nabbit reveals to Saz the truth behind Dodge, and how he was branded a l'Cie, absolutely heartbreaking and gut-wrenching. Vanille runs off in shame and fear. Saz follows her. After that Quistis wannabe, Nabbit encourages him to literally murk a teenager. The confrontation is tense and extremely volatile. Vanille is ready for the worst, and Saz is absolutely torn. I mean, his whole world, his son, all he has to hold and love these days, in this tumultuous time, is now gone. And in his eyes, the very person responsible for making this happen is the young girl in front of him. The girl who moments before all this was sharing laughs with him in excitement. Now, with a gun trained on her, he is at a crossroads. Saz promptly turns the gun to himself, after giving a lecture to Vanille about how her dying won't solve anything, saying that a lot of things can be excused, but shooting a kid ain't one of them. Saz ultimately doesn't take his own life, but he falls to the ground in an emotional wreck, shortly before the pair are captured by that Quistis wannabe and her Psycom cronies. The situation with Vanille is a lesson for Saz in judgment as well as understanding human error. Even overcome with his own grief, he was ultimately able to decipher right from wrong and not let anger cloud his judgment. Vanille is of course not to blame for either of the incidents with Sarah or Dodge. Vanille obviously didn't know that The Falsi Kujata would brand Dodge because it felt intimidated by the presence of her and Fang. Same with her and Fang leaving the door open while exploring. Human error shouldn't be punished, of course, and Saz obviously knows that. When we cut back to the rest of the party, we get a great scene where Hope says he is not scared because he has everyone helping him, including this guy, as he affectionately calls Snow. I just love seeing this turnaround between them. Such a feel-good moment and further development of their big and little brother relationship. Seeing all the characters together a bit later on, laughing and sharing smiles and hearty jokes despite the dark times that they find themselves in. It's some of them who literally, with no guarantee that they'll ever see their recently departed loved ones again, really shows you how much these characters help to hold each other up and inspire positivity in one another. Lightning and Snow, they're like two sides of one coin. They both want to protect Sarah, and Snow helps Lightning realize that there is still hope in this dark world. The scene where Lightning tells Snow that he helped her to believe Sarah was coming back and gave her blessing for Snow and Sarah's marriage was another great example of how far these characters came on their journey. Lightning finally letting down her guard and showing her appreciation for Snow and accepting him as family was once more some great character growth in writing that makes these characters feel real and relatable, much like a movie or blockbuster TV show. Speaking of Snow also helped Hope realize not to be judgmental of others and not to let grief cloud your decision making. Their growth together is also a thing of beauty as well. Vanille and Fang, well, they're each other's rocks, and they help Saz come to terms with the fact that humans aren't perfect and mistakes happen. Lightning learns this from Fang as well. All she had to do was get that slap in on it. Saz showed Vanille what forgiveness and compassion looked like, even in someone's darkest hour. The impact these characters have had on each other in this journey, apart from the fighting that they shared and their shared fate, cannot be understated. The lasting impression that they make on each other, for the better, is always made apparent. Before the party leaves Erba, Hope recalls Lightning's words that truly encouraged him. It's not a question of can or can't. There are some things in life that you simply just do. This perfectly encapsulates the bonds shared between these once complete strangers, and how they are integral to each other's lives and tied together not just by fate, but by the genuine friendship and appreciation they have for one another. The resolve that each of these branded Lassie find to change fate itself all comes from the strength each of them has gained from one another. The story, while the first in a trilogy, is a story of loss and faith in the midst of the great loss. Faith and belief that wouldn't be possible for these characters had they not been united. Together, they resolved to defy destiny, and in the end, they were rewarded as Sarah and Dodge were saved. But this reward was not without its sacrifice. Vanille and Fang had to make the ultimate sacrifice together by turning themselves into crystal to stop Cocoon from falling. And Lightning, she vanished. We, as the player, were left with so many emotions. We had followed this lively group on such a long journey full of twists and turns, as one would expect, but at the end, while there was victory, there was also more loss, and we felt the impact of those losses, along with these characters. Much like we all felt the tremendous gain of Sarah and Dodge coming back, Lightning, Fang, and Vanille were now gone. And the reason it resonated so well with us, the player, is because how close we grew with these characters throughout the journey. Their bonds together, we felt those bonds. We felt the sting of their losses, as we celebrated the triumph over a fate for our characters, worse than death. But, as they say, fate can be a cruel mistress. Final Fantasy XIII is unequivocally the perfect example of ensemble cast writing. This story would not have functioned the same way if you removed any of the characters from it, because they all relied on each other in different integral points of the story. This would not at all be possible without the brilliance of director Motomu Toriyama, as well as he and Daisuke Watanabe's writing. I can say 100% confidently that this is a work that can be studied by makers of TV, film, and story-driven narrative gaming as a blueprint for writing characters who will stick with the viewer long after they leave their seats. Thank you all so much for watching, and if you made it to the end, give yourself a high five. Vanille would want you to be happy, and Vanille would also like you to subscribe to Wutai Clan Gaming if you enjoyed this video essay. It would truly mean so much to me because I've been working on this for the better part of a year, now going on a year and a half actually, and I'm happy to finally see it completed. Special shouts out to Bouncerbecks for editing this video for me. I wouldn't have been able to get this to you guys without her help. So please subscribe to her and check her out. She's awesome. This is Wutai Clan Gaming, and I will see you all again very soon.